Hi, everybody.
Hello.
This is Kurt Roney, and we're coming to you from the University of Mount Olive, right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, where a team of brilliant students has been studying international strategy for the past few weeks. And tonight, this team is going to share with us their views of the JOLLIBEE company, the JOLLIBEE Foods company, which is headquartered right outside of Manila in the Philippines. And it's a fascinating case, and among other things, it proves that McDonald's isn't the only big shot in the fast food industry. There's another one over in Asia that's given McDonald's a real run for its money. But before I get too carried away, I think what I want to do is turn over the meeting to Lindsay McLean, who's going to sort of keep us on track and introduce the case and her teammates. Lindsay, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay McLean, for those of you who don't know. We have in the group Kimberly, Kayla, Benjamin can't be here with us right now, Kyle, and did I miss anybody?
No.
I think that's it. I don't think Amanda's going to be joining us. We just detailed JOLLIBEE, like you said, it's a fast food company based out of the Philippines, and I think with that we can get started.
Okay. Oh, I should have given you that slide when you were introducing people by name. That's the producer's fault. That's not the MC's fault.
Okay, well, I'll get started. The theme of this case is about JOLLIBEE's long-term goal of gaining a leading market position in Asia and its approach to achieving that goal. If you read the case, it kind of details how JOLLIBEE desires to be the leader in the industry, and this kind of talks about their approach to get there. It details a lot about their strategy and a lot of their international endeavors. Additionally, it also talks about how they're expanding their operations to other countries and how they desire to be an international company. It kind of talks about their challenges and also their successes. In regard to that, JOLLIBEE is all over the world. They have subsidiaries in the Philippines, the USA, China, Vietnam, UAE, and among other countries. They are everywhere. Okay, the international perspective. JOLLIBEE is a multinational company. They have international sales, which are currently around 20% of JOLLIBEE Food Corporation business and 30% if you include joint ventures. JOLLIBEE desires to have that 50-50 mix between domestic and international ventures, but the Philippines is booming right now, so they're focusing a lot on the Philippines market. Additionally, their menu varies slightly between regions. They like to cater to local tastes a lot, but they feature a lot of the same items such as burgers and spaghetti and stuff like that. A couple of examples of this is in Vietnam. People say that they have a Vietnamese twist in smaller portion sizes. In the United States, they have a lot of $1 menu items. People like the dollar menu, and then they also have larger portion sizes. And then what's popular in the Philippines, they have a lot of spicy taste, a lot of spicy items on their menu because the Philippines really likes the spiciness. JOLLIBEE is really good at catering to those local tastes and doing research on those markets. And then they also have subsidiaries around the world, including Chowking, Red Ribbon, Mang Inasal, Highland Coffee, and then other ones that we all know like Burger King and Dunkin' Donuts and stuff like that.
Yeah, rather interesting that JOLLIBEE is the name of a chain of fast food restaurants And JOLLIBEE Food Corporation owns JOLLIBEE, that chain, along with Chowking, Red Ribbon, and Mang Inasal, and Highlands Coffee, as well as other chains. And it is the sole licensee of Burger King in the Philippines. So they really spread it around.
Yeah, they think they have a number of brands that are very popular and things that we've all heard of. So they do a lot of horizontal integration there. Okay, so the lesson, I'm just going to read it through and then I'll kind of break it up a little bit. The company must have the right capabilities, knowledge, resource, and people to become the leading market position holder in Asia. They must strategically plan their domestic and international operations and use their competitive advantage in order to remain the industry leader. Okay, so I'll just break it up. The company must have the right capabilities. First, they need to have the right knowledge. They have to have the right plan put in place, and they have to have the right strategy to do so. They have to know how they're going to implement that plan, and with that, they need to have the right people to do so. This is their intellectual resources and their knowledge that's really important here. So this goes with having the right business partners, the right management team, and then additionally, they need the right resources to do so, like the money, for example, and they need the goods to carry out those plans.
I think that Lindsay has made one very important point among several here, and that is the intellectual resources that she mentioned, the right knowledge. And of course, when that has the intellectual resources, the skills and the capabilities, then those people eventually become the users of that knowledge. But as we go through this case, think about how that knowledge is accumulated. How does JOLLIBEE gather up this knowledge, this know-how, these skills? In what forms does it arrive into the company? I think that if you sort of think about that as we go through this case, you'll see that the company does a lot of knowledge acquisition, and that may even be fundamental to the chief executive strategy, but I think I'm getting carried away here. I better turn it back to Lindsay. Shall I flip the slide?
I'm just going to briefly say that I'm going to talk about competitive advantages later, but that plays a big part into their strategic plan in both domestic and international affairs. So you can flip the slide now. Okay, so their products. JOLLIBEE has a number of items that are on various menus across the world, but they do a great job at researching local tastes and creating menus that cater to those local tastes. For example, this is straight off their website. This is their menu for the United States. They have items like fiesta noodles, burgers, steaks, sandwiches, chicken, and spaghetti. Over here, I also see chicken dippers and chicken joy. That's a big thing that they do as well. Next slide, please. And then JOLLIBEE Singapore, they also have similar items, but it does vary a little bit. They have chicken joy, jolly hot dog, jolly spaghetti, they call it, and then they also feature a lot of breakfast items. And this menu over here on the right, this is the Qatar menu that they have. And you can see that they have spaghetti, fiesta noodles, burgers, and then a burger called the Champ, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But you can see that they have a lot of the same items.
Oops, sorry, I got carried away.
Okay, and then additionally, they have subsidiaries that have different menus. A couple examples of this, like I mentioned before, Highland Coffee. This is a Vietnamese coffee shop that they have, and they feature a lot of coffee products like lattes, mochas, tea, hot coffee, iced coffee, stuff like that. Chowking, let me see. This is another big one that they have. It's like a Chinese restaurant, but it has like a Western fast food feel to it. They have items like noodle soups, dim sum, rice bowls with toppings. And then over here on the right, this is taken off of the Red Ribbon website for the United States. This is another one of JOLLIBEE's subsidiaries. They feature items like cakes, rolls, breads, and pastries. And they actually have a location in Virginia Beach, which is, I think, like 3.5 hours away. So a lot of these restaurants are in the United States as well, and they have menus that cater to the United States also. Okay, next slide. And then services, Jollibee has a 30-minute delivery. 30 minutes guaranteed, you can call that number. Probably not in the United States, but in the Philippines, you can call that number and then you are guaranteed your food within 30 minutes. They also have a drive-through that adds to the convenience aspect that they're trying to cater to. And then I thought this part was really cool. They have something called the Jollibee Kids Party. They have a website that you can go to called, I think it's jollibeeparty.com. You can go on there, you can find your local store, you can select a party zone, they call it, which is just a room that you want to use. You can select the theme, like they have different themes like Jolly Race and Jolly Town, and you can select the number of people. From there, they'll like do everything for you. They have the invitations, you can select the food package that you want, and also the cake that you want. So again, that adds to the family feel that they're trying to get across and the convenience aspect of doing it for you. Their current location, their headquarters is in Pasig, Philippines. You can see it right there on the map. Their former one was in, I think it's called Cubao, Philippines, but they've been at this one for quite a while. And then other important locations, Jollibee has 36 locations currently in the United States. And this was just taken off of Google Maps. I thought it was kind of interesting that you can see a lot of them are in California. Looks like we also have some in Texas and probably Chicago, but they're currently in, the majority of them are in California. They're trying to expand throughout the United States.
Hello?
Hello?
Not sure where that's coming from.
It sounded like a jet plane. Somebody
I'm sorry.
somebody must be on an Air Force base.
Marine Corps in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Okay, next slide.
Just before we go there, why does Jollibee have so many locations in California, do you think?
I think California has a lot of people, and that's where they're looking to enter the industry. One thing that they like to do is that they like to buy fast food chains and then improve them and expand them more. So I think that's just been their starting place. There's a lot of fast food chains out in California as well.
Yeah, there sure are. It turns out in the case, we get one explicit answer in the case in the textbook. And then there's another answer that comes up later. But when this business started to go international, the guy who ran the international business, Tony Kitchener, decided to go where expats are. And so a lot of people from the Philippines moved to the United States and located in California, because it's right across from the Pacific, and got jobs there, and communities of Philippine people sprung up. And as a result, Kitchener was able to locate some stores there in California, and with the Jollibee menu, provide the people from the Philippines who live there a menu that reminded them of home and was familiar to them, and so it was an easy move. Later on, we may find out that Jollibee's stores all over the United States and elsewhere contribute to that knowledge we were talking about. Where's a better place in the world to learn how successful fast food companies operate than in the United States, right? Where we've got McDonald's and all those others. So over the years, the folks who managed Jollibee found out how these companies in the United States, there's so many of them in that industry, how they operate, and they picked up that knowledge and eventually capitalized on it. Okay.
Okay, then other important locations, like I said before, they have locations all over the world. A couple examples are like I said before, the United States, the Philippines, obviously, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, and you can see those listed on the map there. Next slide. And I thought, okay, their organizational structure. I thought this was really interesting. This was taken off of their website. It shows Jollibee at the very top, the food corporation, and then it kind of breaks up the company a lot. You can see their Philippine operations, and then it has like Jollibee, and then some of their subsidiaries like Chowking, Greenwich, Red Ribbon, Mang, Inasal, and then Burger King there at the bottom. It also shows their international operations like China, North America, Vietnam, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. It's kind of a nice way to see how the company is broken up and their structure that they use.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to conjecture whether there's a matrix here or not. You could say yes, and you could say no. You could say it's a divisional structure. They've got responsibilities for geographic markets, and then they've got responsibilities for the various product lines. Then they've got a lot of responsibilities for shared services. So you kind of scratch your head and ask yourself just how all these functions interact with each other.
How they all go together. So I just kind of broke up some of the key people in the company. Ernesto Tan Meng Tian, if I'm saying that correctly. He's the president and CEO of the company right now. He was appointed in 2014. The CEO before him was Tony Tan Cactiang, and he was the founder and CEO from the beginning. Ernesto, he joined the company in 1978 as a store manager, and from there he's really moved up throughout the company. He became an area manager, an assistant operation manager, an operation manager, and then in 2012 he became the COO, and then in 2014 he became the CEO. It sounds like they have been grooming him for a while to be the CEO of the company, and he's really moved up the ladder. Other key people, down here we have, I'm going to try to say these names, Yasmiel Veloso Basa. I'm going to be talking about him a little bit later, but he's in charge of finance. And then we have Daniel Rafael Ramon Z. Gomez. He's the chief marketing officer. And then also the vice president and head of R&D. It's an important part as well. Chuan Hua Yang. I said any of those correctly?
You are a very brave lady.
I tried. Okay. And then size of the firm at the time of this case. So in 1996, Jollibee had 208 stores nationwide, and they were working to become a leading company in Asia. They had market share of more than 50% among all hamburger food chains. And just to put it into comparison, today they have over 4,000 stores. So they have definitely grown in the past 21 years very rapidly. Last year alone, they opened 342 stores. And then the CFO, Yasmiel Basa, said that they are looking to open up another 350 new stores worldwide under their 12 brands this year. So in 1996, they had 208 stores, and now in a year, they're opening up way more than that. So they are definitely expanding.
That's something.
Yeah. Okay. Then their goals. Jollibee Food Corporation aims to keep its spot as being Asia's top fast food chain. Back in 2012, 2013, they were, there was an article stating that they were aiming to be the #1 fast food chain in Asia. In 2014, it was reported that they became #1 and they achieved their goal. They've done this through horizontal integration. They've expanded rapidly, and then they also through acquisitions. They also aim to have more play, as they stated, in the U.S. market. They aim to do this by acquiring fast food chains in the U.S. that have room to expand and then making them better, essentially. They're looking, another goal, I mentioned before, they're looking to have a 50-50% mix between international and local operations. The Philippine market is booming right now, so this kind of has been put on the back burner, but they're looking to expand their international sales in the future as well. And then they're also aiming to be among the world's top 5 quick service restaurant chains by 2022. This is in terms of market capitalization, so they're aiming to work towards those goals. Okay, their strategic objectives. So they started the company back in the 70s. The objective initially was to expand throughout Asia. And then next they wanted to become the top fast food chain in Asia. Since they've done that and they've kind of achieved that, their objective has been to expand more heavily into the US market and international endeavors. Like I said before, the Philippine market is booming, so they've kind of pushed their international operations back a little bit, but their strategic objectives are still to expand internationally in the future. Okay, so some issues that they've had in the past. One is with technology. Like I said before, they started in the 70s. Technology was very different back then. So they faced issues with the new technology going on. One example of this was back in 2014. They had 72 stores that were temporarily closed due to delivery problems from an IT system, and they faced various technology issues in the past. Another example of this is with pressure from competition. Bargaining power of buyers is very strong. So buyers have a lot of choices of fast food restaurants to pick from, like McDonald's, KFC, stuff like that. So customers can pick where they want to go. This has been an issue for them. And then also their rivalry with McDonald's. McDonald's has, I think, 36,000 stores. So they're much larger than JOLLIBEE. JOLLIBEE has done a very good job of combating this. They came out with a burger called the Champ, which has aimed to rival the Big Mac. And they have been very successful with that burger. And it's been reported that a lot of people in the Philippines prefer the Champ over the Big Mac. So although they still have that competition, that rivalry with McDonald's, they've done a good job handling that. Also, they've had an increase in the price of raw materials. This has impacted their operating margins. Their expenses have increased. CFO Yasmil Bassa stated that performance might not be as strong due to a rise in raw materials, operating costs, and interest expenses. This has reduced their profit margin, but they're working to combat that. Also, new regulations on contractualization. I'd never heard this term before, so I did a little research on this. This is an issue that they're having in the Philippines. It's when companies hire workers and then they fire them after 5 months of working, because once they hit month 6, they have to regularize the employees and give them certain benefits. So now lawmakers are trying to stop that contractualization and stop companies from doing this. So this, and it's, you know, politics, it's kind of going back and forth now, but these regulations have increased labor expenses.
Ah, interesting. So contractualization is maybe the Philippine equivalent of what in America we call the use of independent contractors in order to avoid the obligation to pay fringe benefits. And
yeah, it's definitely similar. It's one way that companies try to save costs, but it leads to not a lot of job security for.
And so the government has stepped in.
Yeah, they're too, but there's been a lot of back and forth on it from what I gathered.
Very interesting.
Okay, and then I think Kimberly, I want to say is next. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to discuss the administrative heritage. Who
is speaking now?
Kimberly Hedden.
Okay, thank you.
So I said failures that shape JOLLIBEE. Like Lindsay said earlier on in 1981, McDonald's became one of their competitors. The issue was that McDonald's, they simply had more money and operating systems, but JOLLIBEE was able to they said they wouldn't back down, so they were able to compete with McDonald's by creating the Champ Burger, which like Lindsay said, goes against the Big Mac. And what they found was that the Filipinos, they prefer the Champ Burger. Something happened politically. Someone died, and there was like a little bit of a grace period where people weren't investing. So by the time McDonald's came back to try to compete, Jollibee had already had 31 stores and was clearly dominating the area. A next kind of hiccup was in 1985 in Singapore. They had opened up a franchise store, but later decided to dissolve the franchise because corporate came down and wanted to kind of look at how things were going the day to day, and they found out it was not clean. For some reason, they wouldn't let them in the office, and they later found out that this particular franchise that they had in like doing business with was not paying suppliers either. So they dissolved that relationship. Another event that happened a year later, 1986, they did a joint venture in Taiwan, which that originally started off pretty good. It was a 50-50 joint venture, but due to low traffic, pedestrians, they just weren't coming in, and that caused, of course, a decrease in sales. And then as the market increased, so did the rent, and they just couldn't afford it. So they decided to also dissolve that relationship. All right. So in 1987, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Is it
Brunei.
Brunei location opening was successful. And Jollibee believed that the key was to their success, which they did a little bit different this time, was they had Philippine managers run the operation, which local partners supported. So from my understanding, normally they would allow the local partners to run the operation, but this time they did it a little bit different. And it seemed as though they respected the Philippine managers more.
So here we are with some of that corporate learning, organizational learning. Early on in its history, the Jollibee management team started to find out, if I'm understanding you correctly, that they had to be able to exert enough control to see to it that when customers walked into one of these stores, they got a good impression, and that they got the same good impression wherever those stores were. And they could do that in Brunei, but they hadn't been able to do that previously.
No, yes, sir, that's right. They also, during this time, realized that, hey, we need more structure and more resources. Tony Kitchener came along. He was hired as vice president of the international operations. And he came in and he had a plan. And his biggest thing is that he felt like Jollibee, they almost like they needed like a new image. You know, he said you can't basically be world class wearing flip-flops and stuff. So he came in and he remodeled his own little division. He wanted them to act like they were a multinational business. He went on and started recruiting internationalists with experience in and out house. He was hiring in every department. He just wanted it to kind of like restructure it to kind of just give it that multinational feel. His main two goals were to target expats and plant the Jollibee flag. And I had to look up expats because I didn't know, but it's basically where people are residing in countries other than their citizenship. And the Jollibee flag is basically getting their name and their locations out to places where they've never been heard of. Let me see, sorry.
By the way, where did Kitchener come from? Where was he employed before he went to Jollibee?
Pizza Hut. He was actually there. I think he was there 10 years or 14 years.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah,
was
he
Pizza
was an
Hut.
international manager at Pizza Hut, which is a subsidiary of PepsiCo. And PepsiCo is a large corporation with lots of financial resources. And he he built his habits and built his skills in that environment, in a big corporation environment. But when he went to Jollibee, Jollibee wasn't such a big corporation.
Mm-mm.
And I think you're going to tell us pretty quickly that maybe the big corporation approach may not have been quite the one that would work out.
No, it actually did not work out. And I think the biggest issue to me, like when I read it, I felt like he almost tried to divide his group, the international group, from, you know, the people that have been there probably from the beginning. And I think that was the issue, because he talks about, you know, dividing his international group from the Philippine group. And so that later became an issue. But I mean, he had some good ideas, because they used the ideas later on where he had already started like planning and those relationships. But I think how he went about it just was not a good fit for a company like this. Like this company, they want to grow, but they also want to keep their values and how they want business to run. They said they wanted him to kind of like slow it down a little bit. I think he was just too quick for them. So of course they later got rid of him. I said he wasn't a good fit for the position. And then during that transition, they started merging the finance, MIS, and human resource, just trying to rearrange things and still move towards growth. I don't even know if I know how to pronounce this. Is it Manolo?
Manolo. Like Noli Tinzon.
Tinzon. Okay.
For those of you who are not familiar with the Philippines, those of us who are old enough remember that it was a major country in World War II. And the Philippines were the Philippines people were sympathetic to America, even though it was occupied by Japan. And as a result, during the war, they helped a lot of our soldiers who dropped into the Philippines and got into the Philippines and helped them organize actions against the Japanese and eventually recapture the Philippines. MacArthur's famous "I will return" when they had to leave the Philippines, where they had a Pacific base. Philippines are very famous, and they're famous for something else, and that is that initially the Philippines were developed by folks from Spain, and so in the Philippines you find many Spanish names, and one of them happens to be Tinzon.
And so basically after he was hired, he was faced with many challenges. But with Tony, the one that they had recently fired, he had already started kind of planting some different ideas. Even with them being in California, he had already started doing like said it was a 40% partnership with, sorry guys, I gotta get my pictures.
While you're looking up your notes, where did they get Noli Tinzon from? Where was he working before he went to Jollibee?
Oh, he was from McDonald's.
Yeah, yeah, because he had some knowledge, some of that chain fast food knowledge, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And yeah, so that's 40% of the Manel businessmen. So Tony had already started cooking it up, and then So basically, he was good. I just think he wasn't a good fit for the company. Other issues.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. In everything of what you said, Kitchener had a lot of right ideas. The problem was he tried to act like an executive of a big corporation, and that just didn't work. Jollibee had its own culture, and it was a successful startup, but they operated their way, and he wanted them to operate the PepsiCo Pizza Hut way, and it just didn't fly.
Yeah.
He pissed off a lot of people when he
did.
when he built that big complex corporate organization of his too. The guys in the parent company said, "We make all the money and he spends it."
Yeah. Because I think that's what his next step was. He wanted to build more, and I think they said they just couldn't financially afford it, or maybe financially agree with it, more or less. They probably could afford it, but that's not the direction they wanted to go in. Also, he had the decision of making, and this is Tenzon. I don't know why I can't say that. Tenzon in Hong Kong. They wanted to add an additional store, but they were having some difficulties in different areas. There, they had issues where it seemed like the weekend, the company's sales were really good. The Filipinos was coming in, eating, but during the week, business was slow. They also had to look at changes because, of course, every time you're moving to different countries, you're having to kind of cater to what it is that market is wanting. So they included tea dust and evaporated milk as one of their ways of trying to kind of gather or grab the Chinese attention. And then also we went on to say that another issue was hiring, which is, I never thought about it, but hiring, they were having issues hiring people and keeping them. And I guess when you're doing business and like international business, those are things that you do have to think about, offending people and, instead of it just being the bottom line of how we're going to make money, it has to be a big picture as a whole. Jollibee acquired some of its competitors, which we've already talked about in the beginning. Some of the ones that I've already listed, and then Jollibee appeared to be. I feel like they're changing. At first, I thought they were more focused on the Philippines customers, but I think they're learning that if they want to be, especially in America, they're going to have to kind of not change it so much, but kind of like make it more American, like American Filipino. I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
Well, I think you put your finger on something very important. I think as we look at this case and as it occurs, we see a company that initially was ethnocentric. Planting the flag was to put the Philippine Jollibee business model into a lot of other countries in the Pacific, originally in the Southeast Asia, in nearby small countries, and do it the Philippine way, do it the Jollibee way. But when you go to the United States and eventually go to China and elsewhere, you can't do that. You've got to have a different attitude, and so lo and behold, we see this transition from the ethnocentric to the polycentric, right?
Yes. Okay.
We switch a slide now.
Yes.
Who does the economics? Where's our coordinator? Where's the MC?
I want to say that was Benjamin. I don't think it's any of us here. We can all try to talk about it a little bit since he's not here with us.
Okay.
How
Yeah,
about you?
for those who are watching the broadcast or a recording of it later, one of the members of this team has become ill. And among other things, he's let us know that he's got laryngitis. He can't talk, so he can't be with us. So we've got a little impediment here. So as all together, we'll talk about his slides.
Okay. One thing that's kind of sticks out at me right away looking at the top slide is how fast China is growing compared to the United States and Europe in terms of the GDP. They're growing exponentially there. Let me see.
As a matter of fact, China, by the way, for those of you who don't pick up on it, the PPP stands for Purchasing Power Parity. And it's a conversion of GDP numbers so that they are equivalent in purchasing power. China, by way of example, keeps its exchange rates low, its currency exchange rates low, to the extent that it can, because it wants to be easy for companies and customers in foreign countries to buy Chinese goods. And one way to do that is to make the currency inexpensive in terms of exchange. So if you simply take the Chinese economy valued in yuan and convert it to dollars using bank exchange rates, you get a low answer. You don't get the real economy. By the same token, in the United States, you've got very high currency and variations of those two themes in countries all over the world. And so at the University of Pennsylvania, at the Wharton School, a set of algorithms was developed to convert GDPs of essentially all the countries in the world into equivalent terms, comparable terms on purchasing power parity. And when they do that, you get a more truthful measure of the economy's value. And when you do that, you can see that China's economy, the size of it, surpassed the US at the very end of 2013, and the European Union with all 28 countries in it the next year. And because China is growing faster than the more mature countries, the US and Europe, that gap is growing widely. Look how fast it's expected to grow by 2021. That gap gets really wide, doesn't it? So Tony Tan, the old chairman, he picked up on that. You know, he saw what was happening way back there, and he realized that the smart move is to prepare by all this learning that we're talking about, but to prepare to enter China. And if he could get a strong position in China with a growth curve like that, his business would be sure to grow too. And that seems to have been his prime motive, you know, his secret strategy, if you will, his strategic objective was to get that position in China, because if he could, all would be well. And so it was. I'm done.
Okay. I guess also if you look at the India graph next to it, it looks like they're growing very quickly as well. And I believe they're set to surpass us soon in the next few years. I want to say the next slide is similar to this, so maybe let's go to the next slide.
Okay, maybe you want to just take a quick look at the graph on the bottom of this slide, where you have Mexico and Brazil. In the Western Hemisphere, in South America, Brazil has historically been looked on as the growth market. However, in recent years, they've had serious political problems. They've had 3 presidents in as many years. The original one, Mr. Lula, is now in jail. his successor, Wilma Rousseff, was impeached and thrown out of office. And her successor, Mr. Timmer, currently has a 5% approval rating, and so it's very doubtful that he will be reelected, which means they're getting ready for president number 4. And when you've got political turbulence like that, the economy surely suffers. And so the dotted parallel line there is an exception to the International Monetary Fund's forecast. The IMF forecasts a resumption of growth, but of course that can only happen if Brazil gets its political act together, and so far it isn't. I'm in touch with folks in Brazil, and they tell me that it's no better today than it was when that line started down. So there's a good bet that the IMF is going to have to change its forecast. Whether they do or not, Brazil's economy is in the toilet. On the other hand, Mexico is a growth economy, and an economy that suffered a fate sort of like Brazil is Argentina. Only Argentina has elected a new president, a guy named Macri, and he asked Argentina to make some sacrifices to get its fiscal house in order. They haven't liked it, but lo and behold, the Argentine economy is starting to recover, and it may just be that in the future, Argentina becomes the leading economy in South America instead of Brazil. There's your next slide.
Okay, I'm just gonna look at them for a second. This is Benjamin's slide as well, I believe, so.
Okay, let me see if I can help, because we want to keep moving, and pardon me for stepping in, but if Benjamin's not here, that's probably the best thing to do, since I'm pretty conversant with this information. When we take those GDP numbers, and we remember that China is so much larger now, growing larger than the US, we can get the wrong impression. China has over 1.3, now about 1.4 billion people, and the US has about 325 or 0.3 billion people. Since their economies are about the same magnitude, if you divide one by 1.4 billion people and the other by 325 million people, you get a much different answer, and you can see the GDP per capita, again, purchasing power parity. And now the top line is the United States, and right underneath it is Europe, and way down at the bottom is China. On the other hand, China's growing rapidly. Both in the GDP slide that we saw earlier and the GDP per capita slide that we see for India, we see almost a J shape. And most economists are pretty convinced that India's economy, somewhere around 2050, will get close to catching up with China's, which raises a rather interesting question. If you've got India first, China second, and either Europe or the US third, when's the last time you heard anybody talk about the United States being third in the world economically? Probably not very often in the United States. And yet, if we want to play ball on the international field, we're going to have to learn to play according to a new set of rules, because numbers like these just don't lie. On the lower left-hand corner, you see Brazil and Mexico, and a rather interesting surprise. Brazil takes a dip. It takes a dip along with Mexico when we had the recession back in 2008. Okay, but Brazil, you can see, has taken another dip because of this political turbulence, and Mexico has not. And so Mexico's pulling away from the South American leader. And then we see over on the right side just a whole lot of Southeast Asian countries. And the wealthiest, the one with the highest spending power per person, is Singapore, and right behind it, Malaysia. And then down below, we see the Philippines and Vietnam. So those are probably surprising numbers. Most folks some folks are aware that Singapore is a wealthy nation. Not a lot of folks are aware that Malaysia is doing as well as it is. So now, do you want me to do this or you, Lindsay?
I can try talking about it.
Take it away, kid.
China is the growth economy of the present, while India is the growth economy of the future. We kind of saw this on the graph. China surpassed the United States, but India is not far behind. They're coming up in the near future, and they're going to be a very strong contender. China's economy is the largest in which JOLLIBEE participates. They have a lot of locations there, and they have a lot of economic activity going on in China. This is a big market for them additionally, and it's been very successful for them so far. China's economy surpassed the economies of the USA and Europe in 2013 and 2014 respectively. This is kind of what we saw on the graph. Unlike other economies, China did not experience a recession during 2008 and 2009. Their economy has been consistently growing at a very fast rate. And then India's economy is beginning to accelerate as China's did in the previous decade. India has a lot of people in it, and they're having a lot of advances recently. So their economy has been booming as well, and I think they are definitely going to be a strong competition for China.
India is a really mixed bag. It's a head scratcher for what we call political economists. The population is just about the same size as China, and China, you may recall, has that one-child policy. So over time, its population will flatten and actually decline a little bit. So it'll get up to about 1.4 billion and eventually drop back down to around 1.2 billion. India doesn't have a one-child policy, and their birth rate is still higher than the mortality rate. And so over time, India's economy will be significantly larger than China's. And because it is a developing economy, as Lindsay points out, we expect its economy to accelerate. On the other hand, it's got the Brazil problem. Its politics are all mixed up and troublesome. The current president of India, a new guy, is trying to get this squared away. But in India, the states, like the United States have certain prerogatives, but we have a federal government, and the federal government is more powerful than the states. In India, the state governments can be very independent and often are. So it's really hard for India to get its act together. And therefore you have sort of a Brazil problem. And eventually most folks think it'll straighten out, and they'll eventually definitely realize their potential. But until they get their political problems straightened out, that's going to hold them back a bit. And it makes several Western businesses sort of hesitate about getting into India. And yet those with the long view recognize that it's probably a good idea to get there now so that you're in on the ground floor when this thing really takes off.
Okay, the U.S. and European economies are about the same size. Both are mature and experienced a recession during 2008 and 2009. I'm sure we all experienced the recession. The economies took a dip, but they're still recovering from it today. After the recession of 2008 and 2009, Mexico's economy has been growing steadily. And mentioned before, Brazil's economy has been growing rapidly in prior years, but the political turbulence has interrupted this economic growth. I think that's, as Dr. Rooney has talked about. And then Brazil's rate of capital accumulation has plummeted in recent years, indicating very low growth potential. And Argentina's rate of capital accumulation also is quite low. indicating low growth potential.
Okay.
Based on their rates of economic growth, consumption potentials, GDP per capita, and unemployment rates, 4 countries seem to be the most attractive growth rates for QSR, quick service restaurants, firms: China, India, USA, and Philippines. And this is interesting because this is where where Jollibee does a lot of their business. They're looking to enter the USA market a lot more. They're definitely in the Philippines. They're definitely in China, and they're looking into India more as well. Brazil's economy is unattractive and will remain so until its political and domestic economic turbulence subsides. So they're not really a contender at the moment. They need to fix a lot of their political and domestic issues that they're dealing with. And then other Latin American countries, with the exception of Mexico, are also relatively unattractive at the moment.
Who does this part?
That's me,
Who's me?
Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Hello. All right. So Porter's diamond model is used to understand whether or not in a certain location.
Kyle, we're having trouble hearing you.
Are you? 1 second.
Your signal's breaking up a little bit.
1 moment. I'm gonna try to hook up on my phone here instead. Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay.
Now, if you're on your telephone, mute your microphone because we're getting feedback.
Yep. Okay, is this any better?
Far better.
Okay, I apologize about that. I'm using a about 8-year-old laptop that I have a webcam on and expected that to work for me. But we will
You're
go
coming
ahead.
through very, very well now. Good, strong, clear signal.
Sorry about that again. Like I was trying to say before, Porter's diamond model is used to understand whether or not Jollibee will be competitive in a certain location. And of course, I concentrated on the Philippines, United States, and China, as we've been talking a lot about. But I did go ahead and take a look into Mexico because it is a growth economy, although it isn't growing as fast as some other economies that we have looked at. It does prove to be a possible successful market. You can go ahead to the next slide.
Okay, are you going to explain the grades here?
Yeah, I kind of explained that on the next slide more than I did on this one.
Okay, let's help everybody appreciate why we're doing this. Porter developed this model in order to enable analysts to discover whether a country's economy supports an industry. Okay, so the question is, to what extent do the Philippines or US or China or Mexico in their economies make it easier or more difficult to enter and not to enter necessarily, but to operate successfully in that country. So the diamond model provides us with a means to diagnose the extent to which a country's economy supports an industry. Okay.
Okay, so the Philippines and the American economies both seem to have the best chance for success, which we can realize from the numbers of stores which are in both of those countries. The issue with the Philippines expanding further is that it is a very small geographic location that the Philippines is in. takes up. So they already have 1,000 restaurants through the country, and realistically, they can't expand much further than that. There's just not enough geographic space. There's no need to have more high numbers than what they already have restaurant-wise in each large city. The United States also has a great market and lots of fast food restaurants, and that means a lot of rival companies that we have to deal with here in the United States, of course. So that's the biggest drawback from expanding further into the United States, is the fact that with as many competitors as you have, a store in one location in the United States may not be as profitable as it would be, say, in California, where a lot of our stores currently are. China, again, is a very fast-paced society, so that does call for a lot of those QSRs as well. Fast pace is their game in China, so anything where you can go in and get a burger quickly, or whatever you may order from Jollibee in China quickly, that's great, but the Chinese consumers are hard to please, is what I've noticed from my research. There's a lot of I guess disagreements as to what would actually work well on China's menu. So they have found, of course, some items that work well, but expanding their menu in China has proven to be difficult. Mexico is somewhere where actually Jollibee is not currently, and I personally feel that Mexico would be a great location for Jollibee to expand because of the similar cuisine between the Filipinos and Hispanic culture. Both are very spicy, and it wouldn't be difficult to cater to the needs of Mexican people just based on their tastes. Mexico, of course, doesn't have as active an economy as Jollibee's used to, where they've expanded previously. So they may have some difficulty in finding the volumes of people to come to the restaurants initially, but I feel over time that would change.
I think you make a really good point about Mexico, Kyle. I think you really nailed it. You also are quite right about the fast pace in China. Some of you have talked with me before, and you know that I've spent a lot of time in China last year, all over the country in several cities, and in their cities, it's an urbanizing population rapidly, and boy, is it fast-paced. I mean, they're just like New Yorkers. They just got no time for nothing except hurry up, and fast food must really go down well in China.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're on to the 5 forces now. Porter's 5 forces also analyzes markets, but you're looking at this point, you're looking at substitutes, new entrants, and the bargaining power of suppliers and buyers.
And why do we use Porter's 5 forces? What do we try to get out of it?
Basically, you're trying to see how intense the rivalry is going to be in the specific industry you're looking to go into. So
let me help you out just a little bit there, Kyle.
Okay.
Porter developed this model to provide a diagnosis of the profit potential of an industry.
Potential, yes.
And each of these 5 forces drives profit down.
Right.
So here we're trying to play golf. The country with the lowest score wins. Okay.
Right.
Whereas back up here, and it would be worth having a quick look after your summary of these points, where do we draw the conclusion that the country is the most supportive of the economy? It looks like it's a tie between the Philippines and the U.S., and Mexico comes in last on that one, right?
You're actually back on the diamond model.
Yeah, I know. Because after we did this analysis here,
right,
we want to draw the conclusions, and there they are. So now here we go for the 5 forces.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I presume you're going to explain them to us, and then
yes.
What we want to try to conclude is where is the profit potential the highest among these countries, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, go for it.
All right. I actually have more on the next slide.
Okay.
The explanations on the next slide. All right. So the rivalry within the industry, that is very high in most of these countries that I have stated. So fast food restaurants are plentiful, and in the United States especially, as well as China and the Philippines, they are raising as well the amount of different types of restaurants. The exception, of course, is Mexico. That's why they have the lowest number on my conclusions there as well. There's not a whole lot of other fast food restaurants in Mexico. They have very low numbers, actually. In Mexico, there's a lot of actual street vendors, this, that, and the other, that take up a lot of the food industry there. So with that being said, Mexico would pose probably a great place to go. Possibility of new entrants. Jollibee, there's definitely high possibility that new companies are going to come into the market. As markets do continue to expand, so do the needs for more food sources. And these markets expand, people come up with ideas of restaurants that may, compete. It may have something new, a new flair that people are looking for in these different markets. As far as substitutes go, that's a very high issue in all of the countries. So you have you have plenty of fast food restaurants, of course, where you can substitute as substitutes. You also have inexpensive dine-in chains, such as I'm not sure if there aren't very many here, but Steak and Shake is a lower quality, I guess, dine-in chains, Applebee's, somewhere where you can still go get an inexpensive bite to eat. You have in Mexico, and as well as other countries, street vendors and small, just mom and pop shops where you can go get a bite to eat for an inexpensive price, and as well as convenience stores. A lot of these new convenience stores are coming out, and they have hot food options as well as your just bag of chips or something quick and easy. So that is, of course, bargaining powers of suppliers. Luckily for Jollibee, this is kind of I wouldn't say a non-issue, but low-cost food products are plentiful in most of the markets. It's not hard to get the items to make our food options. The biggest issue we have supplier-wise is finding low costs for land and labor. So the land price, of course, depending on your lower market country or lower economies, I guess, your land wouldn't be as expensive. So Mexico, again, poses a good place to go for that. And labor, the problem, I know it touched on it in the case that as they've started international, trying to spread internationally, a lot of companies wanted to see their home country being represented as far as employees of Jollibee, and that's where Jollibee had some issues finding labor. Was just the differences in culture, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Bargaining powers with buyers. This is the number one issue here. Your customers are your bread and butter. So stiff competition in fast food, you need to have your customer approval. Customers, if a customer has a subpar experience, they can go find a substitute product or go to another fast food chain, and chances are they won't be back if they're not impressed the first time. So that is our solution to the issue here for the Porter's 5 Forces, is to provide the best possible customer service experience as well as the food experience, so you have satisfaction from your customers. You have to cater to the unique tastes of your buyers in specific markets to make sure that you have done your job and you have repeat customers, because without them, you won't have a business.
So your conclusions were what? Where are the forces pushing down profit?
Mexico. we're pushing to Mexico just because of there's less rivalry there than other places, as well as as well as the consumer tastes.
Kyle, I think you've added something to the case. I don't think I've ever heard anybody in this case make the argument for Mexico like you have. And it's a beautiful opportunity for Jollibee because of the commonality of Spanish culture and the developing nature of the economy. I think you've hit the nail right on the head, man.
Thank you.
That's just one man's opinion, but
right.
You know, I don't know if we'll get you a higher grade or not, but I think if you sent a memo to Jollibee, they'd read it real carefully.
All right, so Gemmewatt's cage model as well. We can see here you're looking for the difference. You're comparing differences between culture, administration, geography, and economics, and looking at the differences between your personal beginning market to the international market. What would make entry more difficult based on these four items? So the Philippines, of course, have the lowest score. The culture, it's a Filipino company. They cater to the Filipinos. Administration, they have been able to already get their licensing and everything that they need. And geographical, that I only rated them a 2 based on they are local, but they are not able to expand much further based on just the geographical location that they have. And they do still have a strong economy as well. So they have the lowest score there. Although there's uncertainty in the economic standing, the similarities between the cuisine of Mexico and the Philippines makes Mexico an interesting alternative, as I've stated prior. The biggest issue I'm seeing in Mexico is the economy. It's, of course, as I've said before, not quite as strong as the other places that we have entered in the past, but I feel that the cultural similarities will help to make Mexico a viable option. And of course, the U.S. and China, respectively, have difficult barriers to entry. Although we have entered those countries, you still need to deal with the administrative control and cultural differences between the countries. So if I was to tell you I was eating Filipino food in the United States, you may not believe me, I guess you could say. But the differences culturally, it's something that you may not, if you tell somebody that you want to go eat at a Filipino restaurant, they may not be okay with that because they've never heard of a restaurant and the food items at Filipino restaurants, so they may not want to go. And that's kind of the reason that they've rated it higher.
Yeah, Gemmewatt developed this. By the way, I was in a seminar with Pankaj Gemmewatt this summer, and quite amazing. He's published so much. I expected to meet an old guy, and I'm so much older than him. It was embarrassing. But he's got a lot of years of productivity yet to go. The reason he developed this model and published it in a famous article was that he wanted to clarify how difficult it is to move from the home country, in this case the Philippines, to another country. And he reasoned that the reasons are culture, as you pointed out, all that bureaucracy, whether it's protective tariffs, duties, all that paperwork that makes it difficult to get into India, among other things. It's awful. The geographic distance, you can imagine how difficult it is to transport cement a long distance, because pretty soon the cost of the transportation will be more than the value of the cement. And some products like food are very difficult to transport a long distance. economics, of course, whether it's looking at the whole economy or just the spending power of the people, you're asking yourself, you know, can people afford this stuff, and what's the likelihood that they can consume it if they want to? What's the difference between here at home and the country that you're looking at? So sometimes people just leave the home country off the chart entirely. One last item, and I'll get out of your way. Back to the 5 forces, the threat of new entrants. You know, to the extent that these barriers to entry, which is what this model shows you, are high, then the threat of new entrants is low, and that favors the companies that are already in the country, because this represents how difficult it is for new companies, in this case, Jollibee, to break into a new country. Now, they've already broken into the U.S. and China, so the real issue that Kyle has brought up is what does this tell us about how tough it is to get into Mexico? Since we're working with a 5-point scale here, it looks like it's probably difficult, but not impossible.
Right.
Okay.
That is what I've gathered. The economy, of course, is not great, which poses an issue, which is why that's ranked at a 4. From what I've read, the Mexican economy is welcoming to new businesses, so I don't imagine there being too much of a problem getting licensing, and
I agree with you.
Exactly what the
I think
fees
you're right
and all
about
that would be.
I think you're right.
But I don't foresee that being as big of an issue. I feel like the biggest issue would be the geographical distance and the ultimately the getting your brand knowledge out to your consumers in Mexico.
Okay.
All right.
Who's got the finance?
Back to me, Lindsay. Okay, so yes.
Okay.
I found this slide to be really interesting. The numbers over here under 2016 and 2015, those are in Filipino peso, and they are in millions. So I'm going to focus a lot more on the percent change over here. If you look at the net income alone between 2015 and 2016, they had a 20.1% change. So they are making, I mean, that number alone in 1 year is crazy. Their net income is definitely increasing, and their total earnings and their profit is definitely increasing. Additionally, if you look up at system-wide retail sales, their sales have increased by 14.1%. Just to kind of put it into perspective a little bit, in dollar, it is $2.89 billion worth of sales for 2016. So it kind of shows that they're doing a lot of sales. They're selling a lot of food, and they're servicing a lot of people. And then their net income in a dollar figure as well is $117 million in US dollars. So their net income is increasing drastically as well. And then additionally, their revenue, if you look at that number, their percent change is 13.1% for 1 year. Their net operating income between 2015 and 2016 increased by 20.4%. And then the earnings per, and this is for common share, that increased by 24%. So their company, in terms of financial profile, is looking very strong.
Boy, I wish I held their stock. Woo!
Looking pretty good today.
Oh, I think I'm going to have a look at this company for my portfolio. By the way, again, for those who are not familiar with the fast food industry, the term system-wide sales includes the franchises, okay? And Jollibee's income statement shows the franchise fee from the franchises as other income. It is not included in operating income. It is, of course, included in pre-tax profit before taxes or income taxes are charged. The revenue, on the other hand, is just from the stores that Jollibee owns. And so that's the difference between system-wide sales. That's everybody, including the stores that Jollibee Foods Corp does not own. and the stores that it does own represented by revenue. You want me to flip it?
Yes, please. Okay, so strengths and weaknesses. Jollibee has a lot of strengths that they're very good at. One is that they offer quality food at a low price. This is one of the things that they stand for. And in the fast food industry, that having that low price is essential in order to remain competitive. They're very good at offering that quality food to customers, and they take a lot of pride in doing that for their customers. Also, in terms of standardization, their menus differ, but one thing that they can always offer the customer is the consistency between chains and the reliability in their company. So customers know that when they enter Jollibee, that kind of what to expect. Again, their menus vary, but the service level of it is the same. And as mentioned before, the adaptability in new country markets. This is something that they are very good at. This is part of their strategy. They're able to enter new markets, learn about the local area, and adapt to that market in order to remain competitive. And then they also have strong market position in the Philippines. People in the Philippines take great pride in Jollibee, and so they are able to have that strong market position in the Philippines. And then also their ethnic menus. Again, as I mentioned before, they cater to their local tastes. So this is with the Vietnamese twist. People in Vietnam really like that. And then the spicy flavor in the Philippines. They're able to cater to those local tastes and satisfy people's needs. They also do have weaknesses. One is with attracting quality partners and difficulty in attracting expatriates or locals in the new locations. And this was more so an issue back when they first started. I think as Kimberly mentioned, one of their first ventures in Singapore was back in 1985, and they really had an issue between the store manager and the relationship there. Eventually it deteriorated and Jollibee revoked the franchise. So in the past they have faced a lot of issues with finding those quality partners, but this is something that they have gotten much better at recently. And then rapid expansion has led to resource constraints. Since they are expanding so rapidly, they have faced issues with the expansion. That's to be expected, but they seem to have handled it very well. And then it's harder to leverage economies of scale compared to competitors. Jollibee does have 4,000 stores, but compared to McDonald's that has 36,000 and KFC that has 19,000, it's harder for them to take advantage of those economies of scale.
You know, we may be scratching around that concept called GloCal. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Standardization leads to globalization, but because you're in these local markets that have to be served locally, you don't benefit from the scale economy. So there's GloCal.
Yeah, it's very true. Okay, and then sources of competitive advantage. One thing that Jollibee has a competitive advantages is that they're constantly innovating and improving. They like to acquire chains in different regions and then adopt better practices. This is one thing that they're looking at doing a lot in the United States. They like to find fast food restaurants and then expand them further. So it's definitely a source of competitive advantage. Also, as I mentioned before, Filipinos are very proud of their homegrown brand. They aren't as proud of McDonald's. They don't have that same pride in the store. So Filipinos definitely, they have pride in Jollibee and the fact that it's a local company to them. This has definitely allowed them to nourish a strong national identity and do so well in the Asian market. Additionally, they have that flexibility. They're not as big as McDonald's, so McDonald's cannot serve the market in the same way that Jollibee can. On one hand, they have less stores, so they maybe can't take advantage of the economies of scale as much, but having less stores has allowed them to cater to those local markets more and have that flexibility. Also, they are able to appeal the taste and eating habits of the local. One example of this, like I mentioned before, was with Champ versus Big Mac. Jollibee was able to come up with the Champ and use their knowledge of the Filipino market to come up with a burger that really satisfied their needs. Okay, and you can go to the next slide. And then market position. Jollibee is definitely a leader in the industry. They are now the top fast food chain in Asia, and they take a lot of pride in that. At one point, they were trying to catch up. They were a follower, but they are definitely a leader now in the market. They focus on differentiation and low cost. Like I mentioned before, they have efficiency, and they need to have that low cost to satisfy their consumers' needs. Countries have different tastes and preferences in foods, so their differentiation is key. They need to have those changes in the menu and cater to those local tastes. This is, like I mentioned before, a big part of their strategy. They try to learn the preferences of the different regions, and they aim to target those customers with differentiated products. So again, they have focused differentiation and low cost, and that's part of their strategy.
Yeah. And when we talk about low cost and differentiation, the terminology, when we have both of those, it's called hybrid. And I think you're exactly correct.
Who has objectives and strategies?
I do.
Okay.
Kayla.
Hi, Kayla.
Okay, so starting in 1975, they started as an ice cream parlor, and then they branched into sandwiches after the president, Tony Tan, had realized that events were triggered by the 1977 oil crisis, and he realized that it would double the price of ice cream, so they branched into sandwiches. His vision was to have the five F philosophies: the friendliness, favorable, fun atmosphere, flexibility in catering to customers' needs, and family focus. He wanted like a sir and ma'am type of business and environment. Their main objective was to expand and have more opportunities in other Asian countries. And when they had success in the Philippines, it brought opportunities in other Asian countries. His plan was to enter into the U.S. markets, which Noli had realized after he signed a contract soon after was not put into place, but he did have the initial plans to start that. And his goal was to increase international expansion with the objective of making Jollibee the world's top 10 fast food brands by 2000, but he failed at that, which I'll go over in the next slide. So he had thought planting the flag was going to be the best thing to do, which he realized did not work. Like Kimberly has said before, he was too fast-paced for what they were looking for, and they felt like he was moving all over the place instead of focusing on individual franchises and building them to be better. Also, he wasn't taking into consideration that when Jollibee arrived in Indonesia, that the market would be similar to the Philippines, so he didn't take that into account. He believed in first mover advantages in the fast food industry. And then Tony ended up firing him and adopted a new strategy once he realized that this wasn't working. One of the problems was the circularity. Being able to afford advertising and promotion needed to build the brand awareness. They weren't able to establish ground before to have enough revenue to be able to get the brand out there. Also the rapid expansion led to resource restraints. And Jollibee had a broader transnational strategy combining the international, multinational, and other models. And then Kitchener and Bisco, they wanted to be local, or they didn't want to be local or regional. They wanted to go world class. Adaptation and aggregation were used in the strategy, and adaptation is shown by acknowledging and changing to fit market needs, which comes into the fact that they were trying to change the menu, but it led to a lot of controversy. People didn't like that they were changing the menu. Aggregation, increasing efficiency and lowering costs. They were trying to do have less workers so they could lower their operational costs.
I think you made a good point. Earlier, you talked about the need for scale economy. Initially, as you know, they moved into little island nations like Papua New Guinea. And when they tried to do that with his plant the flag strategy, again, there was another lesson that was learned. And that lesson was that if you don't have enough volume in a market or a country, then you can't generate enough profit, enough income or operating income from the stores in that country to support all the overhead that is required, for instance, to pay for media advertising and the administrative structure that is required to support that store, or I should say those stores. And one problem with Kitchener's approach was that these little nation markets that he entered didn't provide the opportunity to generate enough scale, enough revenue to make that happen. And so they always had to operate on a shoestring and couldn't really get to the point of critical mass. So another lesson was learned along this path that JOLLIBEE took. What do we have here?
I'm not sure who did this slide. I didn't do it.
Isn't this the one we think Amanda may have done or something? Didn't Benjamin said he wasn't sure how this slide even got in the PowerPoint?
Oh.
Maybe it was Amanda's then. Okay, well, we can go through it at least. Organizational learning. Tony Tan's approach after, I think it's supposed to be Kitchener's departure, was to learn how to apply quick service restaurant methods in the ethnic food service industry. This is one thing that they had to deal with after Kitchener was fired. They had to learn how to apply those methods into the industry and how to deal with that. He also installed JOLLIBEE into the United States and learned how firms like McDonald's operates. This is kind of how they entered the United States. They had to learn the market and then learn how McDonald's handled the market as well. That's one of their competitors, so kind of had to adapt to that. An example of this is he acquired a small chain of pizza stores in New England, another chain of sandwich shops in the Midwest, etc. And then finally, he acquired 2 Chinese quick service restaurant chains. That was the beginning of his Chinese quick service restaurant empire.
I would think that whoever did this has got it just about right. We have this process of acquiring knowledge that we were talking about earlier on in the program.
Okay. So JOLLIBEE is a multinational company. So their success focuses on the downstream activities. So for marketing and distribution, I said social media. I was able to locate their Facebook page and they have an Instagram page. I said celebrity ads, but it was more or less like the actors that were in the ads, they became famous because their ads go viral. JOLLIBEE's website, of course, brought information for marketing. And JOLLIBEE's Family Awards is a big thing too, where they award a family in the Philippines that have dedicated their life to serving others. So basically they're using kind of like any other company. Most companies, they do give back. They also have a entrepreneurship with farmers, which gives opportunities for small farmers to be their suppliers. So they're doing a line. I feel like they're using that as a marketing strategy. People tend to want to do business or support businesses that are giving back to the community. The sales and services, of course, like we've said, family-friendly atmosphere, low prices, fast food, and just a variety selection of food. They cater to whatever location their branch is located in. And I think it goes really back to their fives of flavorful food, a fun atmosphere, the flexibility in catering to customers' needs, and focusing on family. Again, people want to go to places where the company has values, and you can see their values and how their employees treat the customers. I think that's very important, and that's probably a big reason why they are successful today.
Okay, the value chain, if you just Google it, I guess, you'll get a picture of an arrow, a horizontal arrow, that was given to us by Porter. And it starts at the very beginning of the product or the service as it is designed, originally conceived and planned. The input of raw materials, if we were talking about the auto industry, you'd start out with steel and electric components and so forth. And then as we move down the chain, maybe the arrival of all those subcomponents, including tires and the like, and the computers that are in cars now. And then in the middle would be the assembly of the car in the auto plant. And then further down the chain would be marketing and distribution with the dealers and all of that sort of stuff, and advertising and sales. And finally, the ultimate distribution through the dealer and after the sales service. So it's a time sequence moving from the very conception of the product and all the new products that are coming down the pike. So in these two bullets are fairly late in the quick service restaurant chain industry's value chain. And earlier on would be the design of the store, the design of the menu items, the test kitchen, where new menu items are tested. Eventually, the location and construction of actual physical stores, and the assembly of all the machinery, the training of the people, and ultimately the delivery of the product to the customer. It's not as easy to draw a value chain in the service industry like quick service restaurants as it is in the auto industry. And I think the easiest ones to talk about are marketing and sales. But what we do not have here is a whole value chain. If we were to change the title of the slide to marketing and sales, I think that this would be a good slide because you've covered the some of the marketing and sales issues real well. But when we're talking about value chain, we're talking about where value is created. And value in this case is value that is appreciated by the customer. And JOLLIBEE does generate value in the planning stages earlier on before it actually even produces the hamburger or the spaghetti or whatever it is. So if I don't know whether I can do it from here, but if we were to change this, no, I can't. Whoops. But if I can later on, I'll try to change this title for you to marketing and sales, and then it's a good slide. But the whole value chain is simply not here. Sorry to rain on your parade, but
No, you're fine.
off to Ansoff's matrix, where we talk about the growth, right? Ansos's matrix is given to us in order to explain how a company intends to, or how what approach it has taken to grow. What are those approaches?
I think this was Benjamin's slide too.
Oh.
All right, I'll try to help you here again, just so we can keep going, because you know, the time is moving pretty fast on us. Yeah, Ansoff basically reasoned that you can explain the growth of a company by talking about its products and its markets. Frankly, not everybody would agree with that in academics, but it's become nevertheless an often used model. This is a very frequently used model because it does help us to understand either where the growth has come from or where a company would like the growth to come from. When we talk about existing products being sold into existing markets, that's what companies, managers do when they go to work every day. And the name of that strategy is market penetration, or that strategic objective, I guess. So it's accomplished by advertising. It's accomplished by perhaps building those stores in the same market. All of this management training that you talked about earlier, where their employees or managers have to learn every aspect of the business, and definite quality control, which you have emphasized. If we're talking about offering new, you know, at some point we sell just about as much as we can. And so if you're going to stay in the same market, like Philippines or Malaysia or China or the US, at some point you just get tapped out. You can't sell any more of that product. So what you can do, though, is offer new products. And of course, that's something that McDonald's has been famous for. And as you spoke earlier, that's something that JOLLIBEE is famous for. They've developed a lot of these new dishes, and some of them, even though they're developed for one country, can be brought into another country. But in the same market, when we develop new products, then what we're doing is growing in that market that way. And for JOLLIBEE, part of the strategy was to buy companies like Red Ribbon to get into, I think, was that bakery product? I don't recall right now. But then there's another one that has pizza and sandwich shops and China noodle shops and so forth. And developing new dishes, you know, that they don't acquire, but rather they develop them in their test kitchen, where they come up with these new dishes all the time to keep people coming back for what's new in their store. And that strategy is called product development. The market development strategy in the upper right-hand corner, it represents where the products that they offer now are moved into new markets, in this case, new countries. And of course, that's what they did with a plant the flag strategy. And to some extent, it's what they've done in China. But instead of that, that's not a real popular strategy for JOLLIBEE. Instead, they've been growing by product proliferation in the lower right-hand corner. Now, some illustrations could be when they acquired the pizza chain in New England, that's an Italian concept. Or when they developed Vietnamese dishes, and if they were to acquire a Vietnamese chain, that would probably happen faster. But when they develop new products for the Vietnamese market, and of course in China they bought Chinese fast food chains in order to please the Chinese taste. But those stores were definitely not JOLLIBEE. So they weren't the current product, and they weren't in the current market. They were new products for new markets. Just to sort of put a cap on this for you, if you look at market penetration, existing products for existing markets, that's a relatively low risk strategy, isn't it? Because you know your existing product and you know your existing market, you're just trying to improve on it. For instance, better quality. When you're doing product proliferation with new products and new markets, you're taking a lot of risk. But if you succeed, then you catapult the business into an entirely different domain, and you get a much larger reward for taking a much larger risk. So it just so happens, since this is my profession, I can explain this matrix for whoever is not here and might have developed it. The AAA model, whose is that?
That's me, Lindsay.
Okay.
Okay, so adaptation. This is very strong in this case. Like I mentioned before, various countries and regions have different tastes and desires with food. So Jollibee has been great about adapting to those different tastes as part of their strategy. So they're able to adapt to those local regions and do research on those regions and cater to those markets. So again, that's very strong. Arbitrage, that's not very prevalent in this case. Aggregation. Jollibee strives for efficiency and low cost through volume and standardization in terms of like store standardization. They have economies of scale, so they're able to spread their costs by purchasing in large volumes in material. The store standardization enhances efficiency, such as the assembly line in stores. So that aggregation is very strong in this case as well. Overall, low cost and differentiation, as I mentioned before, are very strong. So adaptation and aggregation are strong here in terms of this model.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Kitchener and Bisco, they felt that Jollibee needed to present themselves as world-class, not local or regional. They made several acquisitions and began expanding worldwide. In order to obtain their goal, they were able to learn from first movers and to adapt to changes in the market. They created international menu items to give Jollibee a local image and redesigned the logo to uphold Jollibee's image in remodeled stores as well. They created a new design, remodeled Indonesian stores, redesigned the logo and added a slogan, great burgers, great chicken, incorporated combos. They kept the bee mascot but changed the red background to orange to differentiate from KFC and Coke. And they changed from styrofoam to paper packaging to appeal to foreign consumers.
Oh, you want it clipped?
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
Hello?
This might have been one of our team members that aren't here. I'll try to talk about it. Center for Global. This focuses on subsidiaries introducing innovations to their markets. For example, Jollibee and Mark Ingersoll, they both serve fried chicken, but they both cater to different people and they have different prices. They've adapted to the innovations and the changes of each market. The Center for Global, locally leveraged. This occurs in all subsidiaries. If all subsidiaries have access to each other's market capabilities. For example, Jollibee listens to what each subsidiary says about their products, market, and so forth, and uses it to adapt products elsewhere. This is part of like their knowledge and how they learn to implement things in other subsidiaries. They learn from a lot of their endeavors. They also learn from their competitors in each region as part of their competitive advantage, and it's how they've been so successful. And local for local. This is a big innovation format for Jollibee. They adapt their menus to each locality. Local market preferences are catered to in each instance. For example, there are smaller portion sizes in Vietnam, and then the offerings in Philippines can be spicy. This is what I've been saying throughout the whole thing. They cater to those local tastes, and they try to serve each market locally. So they're really good about doing that.
Yeah, I think that locally leveraged is really important simply because having been in so many markets, over time the company learns a whole lot about how other companies operate quick service restaurants, and then if they see something they think they can use elsewhere in their other chains, they do. And over time, they accumulate a lot of knowledge doing it.
I think I started. Yeah, I think I started this one, and then you said we all needed to do it. So, Jollibee had succeeded and failed in the past. Mainly, they have been successful. I think, as Kimberly had mentioned, they kind of went back to what Kitchener, kind of what he was talking about as far as localizing. They had half the people that wanted to do it, and half of them didn't, because they thought planting the flag was successful. Some people did, some people disagreed, because it led to debt. Jollibee is currently succeeding in their market. They have altered their strategy to accommodate local market needs on a global scale, which is a global industry. Their struggles were with trying to be the fast food company of choice while still being a small fish. And the questions are, will there be larger profitable opportunities? Will they continue to meet the demands of each country's marketing needs?
Okay. And this is sort of the wrap up of all the models.
Yeah.
Summary of models. Lots of important models. Oh my. So we've come to the end.
We have.
All right. Okay. Interesting case, interesting presentation. And it's kind of rough when you've got one team member who started out and I guess dropped, or at least isn't here tonight, and I guess didn't make the contribution that was expected of her. And another one who's a good guy, and how dare he get sick? right when you're presenting, damn it. I'd go pick a fight with his doctor, or either that or his bacteria. I don't know which, but anyway, or his virus, as it may be. But that makes it kind of rough on you guys, and I'm sympathetic, and please know that I do understand that. In spite of all, I think you kind of maybe picked up from my comments where I'm going to go here, and you can probably almost, I bet if I ask a couple of you what the strategic issue is going to be, I think you could probably already figure it out from my comments. But and of course, over the years, I've learned a little bit about this case, so I can add something to it. And I'll do that now. I'll just sort of summarize a little bit. But without a doubt, this is a case in organizational learning. Big surprise after all my comments that this is a case in organizational learning. And it's also a case about a brilliant guy, Tony Tan. This he's in the fast food industry compared to McDonald's. This is not the not General Motors. This isn't a massive corporation, but it's a big one considering all the stores he's got and all the different subsidiaries and all of the growth. But I've always been impressed by this case, and I just was delighted that you chose it. Because at the end of the day, management comes down to managers and people and their imagination and their innovation and for lack of a better term, their intellect. And Tony Tan is one smart dude. He really is. And Tony Tan had a vision. And although they talked about being the leader in Asia eventually, Tony had another vision. And I think it was to enter China and be the 10,000-pound gorilla in China, because Tony saw and recognized that China was the big growth market in the Eastern Hemisphere, and as well as Southeast Asia. And Philippines is one of the Southeast Asian nations, along with Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand. And so, you know, but if you want to really, you know, where is the brass ring? It's in China, and he saw that. The question is, how do I move from, as a little company in Philippines, where I've got to take on the likes of McDonald's, which is moving in here? And he really outsmarted them. And when you read the case, which was written many years ago, he did the Chinese strategy of the reed. He let the breeze blow right over him, and then he snapped back. And in this, the metaphor is that McDonald's came in and it did an ethnocentric thing. It tried to be McDonald's, like U.S. McDonald's in the Philippines, and it just didn't go down. Tony and JOLLIBEE had a menu that was more suitable to the Philippines, and McDonald's did not learn that. And I think right there, Tony says, you gotta learn before you go into a place what's gonna work there. And after McDonald's went in and, you know, made all this attack, Tony slaps back with this, what do you call their super sandwich? The Champ, I guess. But and the cuisine that was more appealing to that local market. And with that insight, he begins to expand. At first he has this guy Kitchener, who, like we said, has lots of good ideas, only they're before their time, you know, because Kitchener's got this big company attitude. Eventually, what's his name, Nolly comes in, and step by step they move in to other countries. And the first move is into California, and they learn how McDonald's does business, and how Burger King does business, and how Hardee's does business, and how Wendy's does business, and so forth. And they just learn by observing. Is his intention to take over the United States when he's up against companies like that? Hell no. What's his purpose in doing this thing? It's to get smart. It's to find out how they do it. And then take those smarts back to the Philippines and Malaysia and Indonesia and China. Right? Because he's no dummy. You know, he's not gonna try to beat McDonald's in the United States. That ain't gonna happen. Right? But he can take the smarts that he got from McDonald's plus the smarts he had that McDonald's didn't have in Asia and beat the crap out of McDonald's in Asia, which is exactly what he did. Okay? So, and where else does he get these smarts? He gets a pizza chain. What's a pizza chain in New England doing at JOLLIBEE, for God's sake? Answer. It's ethnic food, damn it. It's Italian. And I used to live in New York. I'm Irish. With a name like Roney, I damn well better be. Okay, but I was raised by the people who lived next door to me in Connecticut. Okay, and they were Italian, and that's why I talk with my hands and all that stuff, right? And there's more Italians in New England than Carter's has pills. I mean, they're everywhere, okay? And so up there in New England, they get this chain of Pizza Huts. And what do they do in the chain of pizza? They're going to take on Domino's, for God's sake? Hell no. They'll learn how to market ethnic, right? How to adjust the cuisine and the dishes and how you respond to people in Italian who are Italian and the way they like to be served and the kind of food they like to eat. And on it goes. They get a sandwich shop in the Midwest. They get a bakery shop, Red Ribbon. God, does Tony Tan really want to be in the donut business? Give me a break. He don't want to do that. He wants to learn how to run a donut shop, the way they do the baking and the stuff's got to be fresh and yada, yada, yada. I mean, how would you like to eat spaghetti that's not fresh? So, Tony Tan just learns. And that's why I'm so impressed by him. He knew that he had to soak up all this knowledge in order to be better at running a fast food chain in China than any other fast food chain in China that already existed. Just think about this. Whenever you go into a new country, you got to do better than the people who are already there and know the market better than you do. They have the culture already. How do you C-A-G-E, culture, right? Okay, so somehow this guy Tony Tan is so wise he knows that. I don't know whether he knew it just by instinct, or whether it was that experience with Kitchener and his original experience in planting the flag says, damn, we got to understand what we're getting into before we go there. And if we don't, we're going to get massacred, okay? Because the odds are against you when you're going into somebody else's turf. You've got to know enough about that turf, and then you've got to have something else. You've got to have a method, a technique, an MO that's better than what's already there. How do you get that method? And Tony's answer was organizational learning. I've got to go soak it up by going from one place to the next place. And place is not just geographic, it's market, it's industry, it's all the variations. And eventually it gets so damn good, he invades China and succeeds. Now, right now, as you say, the Philippines and Indonesia, Southeast Asia is doing really well. And so you make hay where the sun shines. And so they're making hay in the Philippines too. But Jollibee is all set up to grow all over Asia because of this ability that it's not just what knowledge they acquired before they made these moves. They've acquired a skill too, and that skill is the ability to learn. They've learned how to go get knowledge where it is and then exploit it. And we were just talking a minute ago about local leverage, right? Center for Global is one thing where you take the knowledge from Jollibee and send it out to the Jollibee stores wherever they may be. But far more valuable is the local leveraging, where you get knowledge from a chain of pizza stores in New England and you take it to the Philippines. For God's sake, just think about that. Okay, and yet it can be done, and he did it. Wow. That's one hell of a story. And if you want to know whether it's true or not and whether it worked, we just go back to those smiling financial numbers. Aren't they nice? Oh my God, I wish I could make money like that. Okay, so Tony Tan is a smart guy, okay, and we hope that he has trained his managers. We think so because they're promoting from within and they're sharing all that knowledge with these people as they enter into the top management ranks. So it looks like their organization, not just individual people, but the organization and that community of managers in the company has learned this stuff. And if as long as they continue to do that successfully, this company is going to beat the crap out of its competition in Asia. That is my summary. Okay. Anybody want to ask a question or comment about it? Oh, like, what is this raving maniac on the other end of the screen talking about? Any comments or questions at all? So else, Nobody wants to say nothing, huh? Okay. So let me see if I can gin up some kind of a question here. The strategic issue in this case is clearly organizational learning. Please write an essay to summarize how JOLLIBEE acquired and exploited organizational learning in this case. That's it. That's it. That's the whole enchilada. Now, do you have any more questions?
Yep. I don't think so.
Huh? Nobody says nothing. If that's true, then Homer, what do you think? Were you listening in on this? Hi, Zaida, what did you think? Claudina, are you still there? What did you think? Madison? Hey, these guys are all from the Echo team. Wow.
I like
Get
this
in on you guys.
Yes, I thought they did great.
Well, I like this essay better. It seems like it's gonna probably be a little easier to tackle.
Yeah, this would definitely be easier than the Echo one.
Yeah, I think so.
Be careful, hotshot.
Uh-oh.
The Echo question gave you a whole lot, it gave you a very specific framework to respond to. This one is wide open. But in answering the question, to get full credit, you got to talk about all that stuff that's been mentioned.
Wow.
Now, when I write the question, I may provide some more specifics in the framework to guide the folks in answering. But between you and me, if I was trying to defend a PhD dissertation, I'd rather have the Echo question because I know specifically what it is you're looking for.
Well, that doesn't make something to look forward to.
Claudina, you turn on your camera. You can come in.
Oh, God, my hair. Everybody.
Hold on. I think I'm going to. Look,
I got that little, like,
let me
sumo wrestler bun going on.
Let me turn off the recorder because I've asked the question now, and so I should stop the recording. Hold on just a minute.